Hey everyone, welcome to the latest episode of the Bandits. I'm Warren Phillips.
I'm Mike Farah.
And before we go any further, let's say thank you to our partners at TwoMorrows Publishing. Check out their website, twomorrows.com, TWOMORROWS.com. They have some great new books coming out very soon about Steve Ditko, about other legends that are coming out, as well as their different magazines and publications. So please go check them out. So what do we have on the show today? We have another heavyweight of comics. We're talking to Mr. Greg Hildebrandt. Greg and his late brother Tom are known so well for their incredible Star Wars posters, X-Men posters, Lord of the Rings posters, so much sci-fi and fantasy that they put together. It is beautiful, it is amazing, and Greg is such an incredibly talented man.
Yeah, the brothers Hildebrandt are legends in their field in terms of fantasy illustration. And you know, that Star Wars poster, that iconic Star Wars poster, before the movie even came out, you know, gave us the flavor of what was to come with Luke Skywalker, you know, raising the lightsaber in front of the menacing face of Darth Vader. And then, of course, you know, their background in Lord of the Rings. And, you know, Greg was instrumental to all of the designs of some calendars for Lord of the Rings, as well as some other publications. So, as I said, just, you know, iconic draftsman, and it was great to talk to him. So let's hear it. This is Greg Hildebrandt.
Truly comic book, and not only comic book, but artistic royalty, Mr. Greg Hildebrandt on the show. Sir, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Sure. Nice to be here.
The first question we ask everybody, and for you it's a little bit different, but it's, how did you first get into not only comics, but also fantasy in general?
Well, I was born in 1939, so comic books were it for kids at that age. The strips, comic strips, and then comic books. So I've been into comics since I was a little kid, and went through an entire career of art in animation, live action, children's book illustration, et cetera, and so forth. And finally got to a point where I said, I want to do something in the comics. I haven't done it professionally, you know, ever. So I just jumped into, went over to Marvel, and they gave my brother and myself, Tim and I were working together, a Marvel Masterpieces set. So that's kind of how I got into doing comics, or comic related, everything, posters and whatnot, and 2 graphic novels.
Now, you were known for, you and your brother, for obviously early in your career, for collaborating together, kind of working together. What was the nature of the collaboration between you and your brother when you had a project?
Well, we were twins, so when we were 2 separate personalities, but when it came to work, we were like one person, and there was no real succinct division. We just jumped in, and it was like one person doing it. And again, we were like Huey, Dewey, and Louie. You know, we started a sentence, and Tim would finish it, or he'd start it, I'd finish it. So, you know, we were in the same brain in a sense, you know, when we worked together. So the collaboration was, we did all of it together. There's no division like a pencil inker colorist, you know, there was none of that.
But did you, so if you had a, let's say, you know, the calendars, the Lord of the Ring calendars, you had one illustration, you would say start that illustration, and he would add embellishments, and then you would add more, and that's how it sort of build in layers kind of thing?
Yeah, well, first, obviously, once we got the project, we reread the rings entirely now with marking scenes for illustration. So he's reading it separately, I'm reading it separately. And we're just putting in markers, you know, pieces of paper for where a scene should be illustrated. You end up with thousands of scenes out of those, you know, it's like, holy mackerel. And then it's like, well, we know we're doing a calendar. This is going to be a calendar for Ballantine Books. There's going to be 12 illustrations, a centerfold, and a cover. So it's like, what the hell do you do next? Well, approach it like good guys and bad guys. And we discussed that. We both go over all the markings that we both made in the books, and they're generally are like almost 100% the same scenes, you know. So we start to boil it. Oh, we got to, the centerfold came first. Well, that's the whole fellowship. from the first calendar. It's like the fellowship should be in, boom, there they are in a widespread. So we discuss that. We talk about that just between ourselves, and then start to do thumbnails of compositions. If it's in a calendar, they're primarily square or rectangular, except the center's fold out is a much wider panoramic view. And that again is, I think, was almost instant. Well, that should be the Fellowship of the Ring, a big wide, movement from left to right. And we discuss again that, and we talk through it, and we decide. Tim and I will draw a bunch of the characters and set them all up, position them, talk about that. Again, it's back and forth between the two of us. And maybe we're doing sketches all through this. And then with that particular scene, Gandalf's primary, he's looking and kind of and all the other guys are all set up. And so we're talking about the composition, moving the figures around. So who should be predominant? Where should they be positioned given the nature? And all this is just talked about between the two of us. And then lighting, we're discussing lighting all through this. Well, the sun should be to the right, coming down low, blah, 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 blah. And then in other scenes, well, it should be moonlight or firelight. Where's it coming from? Is it backlit? Is it frontal lit? Is it side lit? All that's a discussion between us. And then we'll both individually start to draw our perception of the scene, just the way we're seeing it by ourselves. And most of the time, again, they were pretty much the same, but sometimes they weren't. And either one would have worked. And so you kind of say, oh, okay, that one. And then we move forward with, well, first of all, approval, say, of all those sketches for the calendar for Marvel, from the art director, and Judy Lynn and Lester Del Rey, who were the editor and primary. Lester was the Tolkien expert. He knew those books cold, man. He knew the color of an arrow if it was wrong. The feathers of the arrow. He was incredible. And again, this is the two of us discussing all this, drawing separately. But when it came time finally now to do a photo shoot, we're both working that. We're working out the costumes, and finally the painting, which is the tip of the iceberg. We finally do the final layouts together. And if they're big enough, like they were, we have a giant drawing board. We're drawing together on the same piece of paper. And then finally, when we were painting on masonite panels, Tim sat on one side, I sat in the middle, and our palette was in the middle, and we were both on either side. And we just started painting, starting in the distance always, moving to the foreground. Again, discussing the palette, the intensity of, say, the moonlight and the firelight. If you got moonlight and firelight, and see, we're starting to mix up color. Now that's too much white. He would stand in the background while I'm applying it. No, it should be tone it down, bring more chroma, less chroma. It was like that. So it was that makes it clearer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's amazing to have that much, having that much feedback while you're doing a project, or that much kind of second opinion, I guess.
Oh yeah, basically, because again, like I just said, one of us would keep painting, the other guy would sit back at a nice distance and just study it, and removed from the anxiety of the process of painting, just calmly analyzing. Because as Chuck Jones says, anxiety is the handmaiden of creativity. So when you're in that process, there's anxiety of everything. So the viewer is calm, and you say, now, little stronger chroma on the fire, more yellow and more orange. Squeeze some orange into your pile of paint, like that.
Yeah.
It was great. And we worked separately too. Tim would work, I would work separately. Sometimes I would start a painting, or he would start a painting. He would leave it in my studio, and he'd go home and work on another one, and I'd be working on this one. And so we're working back and forth like that. That's how we did that Star Wars poster. Well, we didn't really, he slept while I worked on it, and then I slept while he worked on it. The actual painting, the drawing, was derived from Tom Young's drawing layout. And then we did a little bit of moving around with it. And then finally, in the final hour or so, or 2 hours of the painting, we both got together on it and just finished it all off. Generally, that's how we did every painting back then.
It's pretty awesome. Now, we think of you as, one of the masters, one of the best out there. And, and we're not blowing smoke, but, my question for you is, was there a point in your career where you thought to yourself, you know, you had the confidence to say, you know what, the decision I made was the right decision. The decision to become an artist was the right one for me, that I know what I'm doing, and that, you know, people trust in my instincts. Was there a certain project or a certain time where you had that realization?
Well, no, I don't think. Tim and I saw Disney's Pinocchio when we were 5. You imagine, this is 2 kids that had never seen a movie. All right, so there's no movies. All you got is radio and comics and books and illustrated books, right? So they've never seen a movie. One of my cousin's birthday, all the kids with my mother and her 2 sisters went downtown Detroit to the Michigan Theater, which is in itself one of those Art Deco monumental Cecil B. DeMille sets, you know, and went in there, and we're looking at, you know, it's like, what is this? You know, what are we? Were about 6, I think 6 or 7, and 6, I think, and then went in, sat down. This thing starts on the screen. I'd never seen a movie before, either the Tim. And you're totally, we know it's artwork because we were already into drawing. We were like 3 years old, we were drawing, or maybe before. I can't remember beyond that point. And that was it. We wanted to do that. Whatever the hell that was, we wanted to do that. So that film triggered everything, and it really never stopped. It was like a runaway train after that. I never had any thought, or either the Tim, that we would ever do anything else other than art of some kind. Animation was the initial obsession. It started with animation and then moved out into all kinds of other areas. But there was never really a point where I said, I know I'm doing the right thing. It ran me. I didn't run it. You know, it was just like you just kept going, from moving from one thing to the next. Opportunities would arise, you jump into that one. This would arise, you jump into that, and that's the way it worked and went all of our lives.
Yeah.
I would like to, without belaboring it too much, jump back into that Star Wars poster, which I guess is considered Style B, right?
Yeah,
I think there were 3 ultimately posters. There was one even after yours.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So I think all 3 of them were used in the actual promotions of the movie. But ultimately, the one that came after yours, I think, sort of was the last one that came out before them.
Right.
Did you know that there was going to be another poster, and were you sort of disappointed that there was another one out there?
Hell no, I didn't know anything about the whole damn thing. You know, there was a movie poster studio in New York City. And I lived in Jersey. We were always into the city. That's where Tim and I did most of our work, out of New York. And we were illustrating all kinds of stuff. I'm giving you a backup to the whole thing, okay? And it got down to, it was getting kind of dry. We were doing editorial art and all kinds of things, you know, just to stay alive, doing illustration. Did a lot of children's books, a lot of golden books, all kinds of stuff. And one of the last things we were working on was a toilet training book. And so we said, this is getting very, very dull. Let's look for something a little more exciting, possibly. Movie posters. So in those days, you know, you had yellow pages, opened up the yellow pages. Look, I forgot what the hell the title of it was. Movie poster art, advertising art for movies. I forgot how it was listed even, but we opened it up and found a page with these lists, and they kind of went like this. And wherever that so-and-so studio in New York called them, and we said, well, we're illustrators, we've done this and this and this and this. A lot of children's books, nothing of any fame yet, because this is before doing the Lord of the Rings. Mm-hmm. And the guy said, yeah, well, come on over, bring your portfolio over. In those days, you could call somebody. The actual the art director in the studio picked up the phone, and you could talk to people. And they said, yeah, come on over. So we brought a portfolio in. But we brought our portfolio in. On the chairs all around in the studio were these paintings from a film called Young Frankenstein by Mel Brooks. I said, what the hell is that? Well, Brooks, he's doing Young Frankenstein. It's going to be black and white. Blah, blah, blah. I said, we got to do a poster because we're a Mel Brooks fan and we're a fan of obviously Universal Monsters. Good God, that was primary when we were kids. And we got to do a poster. We got to do a poster. He said, no, the money's all gone. Here they all are. And they're being shipped out tomorrow morning. I said, I don't care. We've got to do a poster. We'll bring it in the morning. The guys were like, okay. And then they gave us a bunch of glossies, 8x10 glossies from the film. And we went home on the train going back to Jersey. Tim and I worked out a setup. Well, I see the monster, the girl, the Igor, holding the vial, young Frankenstein, the castle. Blah, blah. So we got home, shot a couple of Polaroid shots of us posing to get the lighting and stuff, and they just bashed into a painting. Stayed up all night working on it, and brought it back in the next morning. They were kind of flabbergasted. I said, "What? It didn't get used, but 3 years later, they gave us a call. Hey, you guys, we need a poster for a science fiction movie. The director isn't really happy with the one he's got. That's what they told us." And I said, okay, well, great. Well, what is it? They said, come on in. So we go in, and there's all these photos out of Star Wars, and I'm looking at them, and Tim and I are looking at them. Holy crap, who the hell is this guy with the helmet and everything? They didn't see the film, these guys. They said, I don't know, the Man in the Iron Mask or something. I said, and they showed us they had Tom Young's poster. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, what do you want us to do? That's beautiful. What the hell are we supposed to do? And they said, well, the director said he wants it more comic booky. Whatever that meant. That's the only directive that we got. More comic booky. So I said, okay, keep the same setup, do things. So Tim and I, again, on the train, got all the reference from them, the shots, and they said, don't worry about likenesses of the two characters. Nobody knows who they are. And I said, because you're going to bash this thing. They needed it in a week.
Right.
The film was coming out in a week, and they needed this for newspaper ads, so they had to have it yesterday.
Yeah.
And we went home and we discussed the whole thing on the train. What the hell does he mean, comic booky? And then you're talking 1977. There was no sophisticated coloration yet in comics. It was all 4-color, flat colors. I said, he doesn't want ink outlines and flat colors. That's not what they're talking about. So I thought comic booky meaning Frazetta-ish.
Mm.
Yeah.
That
makes sense.
Yeah.
Right? Makes sense. So,
yeah.
They told us rip the girl's skirt and everything. And we're looking at all these photos of Carrie, didn't know who she was, but Carrie Fisher. I said, I'm saying to she looks like a nun. I mean, they ripped the skirt, okay? And I said, okay, I got the point. So we went home. They wanted her a little sexier. Mm-hmm. So I grabbed my then first wife and she had a negligee, I ripped a negligee, shot a couple Polaroid shots of her. And a buddy of mine happened to be coming to the studio. I threw this short bathrobe on him that I was already using for a character that I was creating and posed Polaroid shots. And then Tim and I worked around the clock doing the layout. But this time it's probably midnight. And we just kept at it. We finally gessoed the masonite panel that we were going to paint on, sanded it down, got the drawing finished, got it transferred onto the masonite panel, gessoed masonite panel. And then one of us went to sleep, took a break for a couple hours where the other guy started painting. We discussed all the coloration. We were discussing the color all the way along in terms of more comic booky, meaning we were assuming more intense color and contrast than Tom Young's poster, which is very subtle, right? Mm-hmm. So we figure, well, the warm, cool thing, warm and cool, that contrast, warm from the sword and cool, Darth Vader in the head and the Death Star and everything. Keep it all blue, keep this all warm light. So and then we mixed up a palette. Then one of us, I forgot who the hell it was by this point, went to sleep. The other guy started painting. A couple hours, wake the other guy up. He'd paint for a while, blah, 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 like that. And then at the end, for several hours, we worked out together. We did it in 36 hours and brought it in, and they liked it. There was no commentary. I said to one of the art directors, I said, maybe in the back on the right-hand side that you need a couple of characters, just to kind of add a whole thing. They said, oh, yeah, okay. And I said, that big hairy guy, whatever he is. And they said, well, they went around the corner. I guess they called Lucas. They didn't say who the hell they called. And I still don't know. And they came back, I guess it was Lucas, because he said, no, make the two robots. And so we said, yeah. So we drew the two robots from the reference they had, and then we needed the color, the paint. So he said, well, what do you need? I need this. And the guy ran down the street to get us paint and brushes and what we needed. And we painted it there in the studio at the ad agency. And then they zip it over to Lucas, a shot of it. And they called us the next day and said, you got to come in. Why? The director wants you to make your name bigger. Which is never take the name off. They don't want the artist getting the recognition for anything. And why is because we were famous now for the rings, because we had illustrated the rings a few years before and had a global fan following, a huge fan following. And I guess Lucas knew that. I still don't know because I never talked to the man. I've never met him. So I'm guessing all this or picking it from what people tell me, So as far as being disappointed about another poster, I didn't care. I mean, I did this one. I was on to the next thing. I was on to my thing. I was writing and illustrating my own fantasy, Ursharak, which Banta Books published. That's what I was totally into at that moment. You get me?
Yeah.
When I focus a job, Tim and I both were professionals. We totally give 1,000,000,000% of ourselves to that for that length of time. Then you're on to the next thing. Cha-ching.
When did it hit? Did it hit you that this became an iconic image for an iconic movie at some point down the line, or were you guys just heads down and you're like, well, that's in the past?
Yeah, it did, but certainly not then. The movie came out and holy crap! I mean, how old were you guys? Were you even born yet? I don't know.
We were just being born.
The world, it was like AD and BC. I mean, literally. I mean, it was like, whoa! The whole goddamn planet went nuts, and everybody in the city, they calling, but they want rockets, and they want jets flying over the top of the camera when you do the shot. They want explosions. That was it. Everything was going in that direction. We were getting calls like that.
Amazing.
Meanwhile, the film is out, and we had an agreement that we were supposed to do this for advertising, newspaper ads. That was the poster was going to be used for that, and a one sheet outside the theater. And it ends up as a product. So that became kind of a thing where, without getting into the gory details, try to get at least the painting back. Because in those days, I mean, you most of us illustrators would just bring the art into the wherever you're doing it for, and they handled all the shooting and they keep it. There was a kind of like a unwritten understanding amongst a lot of illustrators. Well, first of all, what are you going to do with it? Nobody cared back then about reselling anything, and so we just left the painting there, and I struggled to get it back. Impossible. I just wanted the painting back because there was no agreement at all in writing or a contract of any kind that said Fox, 20th Century Fox or Lucas owned the painting. That wasn't there, but it couldn't do it. It was not, economically feasible to pursue it.
Ugh.
So, I mean, I don't know. Does that answer anything?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it seems like a good 36 hours well spent.
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing. Hey, look I'm really happy that I don't know. Happy is the word. What the hell? That that we got the job to do the job. I mean, and all that stuff. But people always come up to me. Kids come up to me at conventions and say, "I just got to let you know, I'm a big Star Wars fan." I said, "Oh, okay, all right now." And so it's I'm not I'm a pro. I'm a professional. I'm not imbued. I'm not naive. Everybody loves the movies, right? But that's what's there. This is an after thing after the movie, and I know that's what it is. So the movie's everything. This is a piece of artwork, post-production. So am I glad? Yeah, but I don't want it written on my chisel on my tombstone.
Makes sense.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm very happy or grateful, what the hell ever the word is, for having done it.
But you've done also a lot of stuff since then too, and
Oh, way before that. I mean,
yeah.
the thing that gets an illustrator, like a lot of them, I mean, it's like everybody knows this one thing. It's like, it's like, holy shit, do you know how much I've done? Like, I remember seeing, I think Orson Welles was on the Dick Cavett show way back when, and everybody, he's sitting in a French restaurant somewhere in Paris by himself. The waiter comes up to him. This is Welles telling the story and says, "Oh, Mr. Welles, Orson, Citizen Kane, blah, blah, blah." And Welles starts bellowing. He said, "Can you imagine what I looked like in the corner? I've done this and I've done that and I've done that." I don't like it. You know what I mean?
Well, because
not that the poster was anything near Citizen Kane, but I mean, you know what I'm saying. But,
well, because of the success of the Lord of the Rings calendar and Star Wars, when you get a job, are there parameters ever put on you because of, people know that you're going to do an amazing job, but do they ever, do you have free reign to create any way you like?
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. But again, now my wife, now Jean, who has been my business manager and agent since 1979, she handles everything with the clients. And I mean, she has made sure since 79 that my name is still out there.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like all artists, you disappear. You're like, you're like old soldiers never die, they just fade away. And the same with illustrators generally, fade away. Jean has made a determined effort to do that, and she's the one that constantly keeps in touch with all the people that we do work for.
Right.
And she works everything out with them. So that when it finally Jean comes to me and says, "Here's the project," it's all been set up already. Working with Marvel, that Masterpiece is set, Marvel Masterpiece, where Tim and I came together again. We had stopped working together for a number of years, and we came together to do that set, and Jean managed that whole process and procedure. She worked it all out with the people at Marvel, and she worked out the every detail of it. So then they basically just gave us a list of characters. Jean did all the reading to research, because I hadn't been kept up with Marvel. You got to get Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, 1960, right? Spider-Man, and then Fantastic Four, and all this, the new Marvel. I didn't see any of that stuff. I was not aware of it. I was totally into filmmaking at that period of my life, and illustrating general illustration all over the place. I was not looking at comic books. I think maybe the last comic book that I picked really was into was Joe Kubert's Tor in 1950. I mean, I was aware of them, obviously. Yeah. I knew the world and everything, but Jean got Marvel to send every single book. So stacks of these books. I mean, she's reading them all, informing me all who these characters are.
That's incredible.
All the X-Men, all of that. So I know them through Jean explaining them all to me, which he's done many times in the past. Once we did illustrated Mary Stewart's Merlin, which is an epic trilogy by Lady Stewart. Jean read the whole book first, marked up all the scenes, because we've been working together for a while now. Jean and I working separately from Tim now. Tim's off on his own. And she worked everything out. She worked the whole damn thing out and worked with me to work on all those illustrations, So it's an interesting, anyway, whatever. I'm just rambling.
I know. She sounds like an incredible lady and a wonderful partner to have.
She's not only creative. I mean, she majored in art in college, and she's an artist herself. But it's her business sense and people sense.
Right.
She's a people person. She knows how to talk, and she's great. She's a real human being with people. She never makes judgments. There's no high or low to her.
Right.
There's no up there or down here. It's like, and she's very straight in dealing with people. A lot of the guys at Marvel, they were grown-up boys running the place. They were intimidated of her at first.
Yeah.
Like, because this little boys club where we were at playing,
Yeah.
Something you mentioned earlier that I didn't know, and I'm absolutely fascinated now by is uh what your concept was for the Young Frankenstein poster, because you said you're a Universal Monster fan. I'm a Universal Monster fan. I'd love to hear your idea of how you wanted to create this poster.
I think the creature was hugging the Madeline Kahn character in a big romantic, like a romance, pulp romance cover, more pulpy, you know?
Yep.
The castle was in the back. Igor was the whole figure. This was a medium close-up shot, if I remember right, of the big figures. They were big and predominant, you know, like a romance thing. Behind that was all structured, the castle, young Frankenstein holding a vial with his hair all standing up and his big glasses,
Right.
you know, kind of thing. Igor, the full figure of Igor, a moon in the sky, you know, the two figures in the foreground, bottom low lit with a warm light on them. So it was that warm, cool thing again.
Right.
And I have no idea where the hell the painting is. I assume Mel Brooks has it.
Wow.
So when
Okay.
people, but it's a kind of a cute thing I like to throw out there. They ask, how did you get the Star Wars poster? I say, well, Mel Brooks.
Naturally.
How would you, say you were back, in the time of the Frankenstein movie and the Dracula films and stuff like that. If you were asked to do a poster, how would you create a poster that maybe startles somebody walking by and seeing it, but doesn't horrify them? Like, how do you capture horror to get people's curiosity, but not to the point where they're like, this might be too scary for me?
Well, obviously you don't show blood,
right,
or exit wounds,
right,
or hatchets in the head, but the great EC stuff, right?
Yep.
You had to take the hatchet out, right?
Things like that.
Probably not that explicit,
right?
No, and probably not showing the horror. I remember George Pal. He was one of my childhood heroes. You know, the time machine moving backwards, then to War of the Worlds. I think is still the best, my favorite 1950s sci-fi film. Got to meet Mr. Pal.
Oh, wow.
Pitched him with our Urshak story, which he liked. He praised our pitch, which he was high from me, coming from him, because he did his own pitches. He was an artist. He did his own storyboards and everything. And he said, it's most frightening when left unseen. You know, that's what got me about and my character in Urshak, Torgon, the Death Lord of Golgarath, was Tim and I were designing him before the poster, before Star Wars,
right?
In between the last Tolkien calendar and then the Star Wars poster, we were working on our novel. And we were designing all the characters. And look at the ironic synchronistic juxtaposition. Our principal character, Aelwan, the elf prince, blonde hair, blue short toga, not toga, like
tunic,
pants, white boots. Elfgard is magic sword. Hugh Oxen was his masculine, every man, sort of like bow and arrow, Robin Hood-y type bearded guy. Hugh's partner was a 7-foot hairy guy. This is Tim and I designing this now, right?
Yeah.
And about all our characters, I did a big painting of them all. Zara, Amazon princess. She was Tolkien, of course, women were what? There's 3 women in Tolkien. And they're very powerful, but they're not predominant. So we were going to, women were going to be a bigger role in our story. And Horgon, the evil power that Eowyn has to face off, he and only he. I mean, every quest type thing, and like Star Wars, and so we create that Eowyn is an ancestor of Torgon. Torgon's his great grandfather going way back. So that's they're united in that sense. He's gone to the evil, he's gone to good. And so again in Torgon I did a painting of him with a giant mace. He's got long black robes. He's encased in armor in mail. Got a helmet on. You can't see a face. You just see eyes, glowing eyes, that kind of thing, with horns.
Yeah.
And so we get in to do the poster for Star Wars, and I'm looking, and Tim and I are looking at each other. Look at the big hairy guy. Look at the white guy with the character that we make it. Look at the who's this guy? The man in the iron mask guy. It was
all.
It was free. It was like to Tim and me, and because I got back home and we're kind of like, holy crap. And well, we got to reduce the big hairy guy to make him smaller, you know. And after the film came out, you know, and you saw the film, it's like, oh my God, well, we can't make Torgon covered with Iron Mask, or we're going to say you're copying Darth Vader. So we had to take the helmet off. As soon as you take the helmet off, it's just another scary face.
James.
So I think horror is much more, my long story about that, Mr. Powell says, is best unseen. Don't see it. Don't imply it, but don't show it. That's more frightening because imagination takes over. In the old days of radio, that's how it was.
Yeah.
Because I would sit in front of the shadow in the house of mystery, and you're like, holy shit, who are you? You know?
Right. Or like the movie Jaws, you don't see the shark until
right.
You know, it's halfway through
Much
the
more
movie.
terrifying.
Exactly.
Much more terrifying. As soon as you see it, well, that's what it is. Oh, that's it.
Yeah, in comics they had to, you know, hide the big reveals to the like last pages or the last panel.
Yeah.
So you can, you know, build up the suspense.
Absolutely. Because you give it all away, I mean, big deal.
Right.
Just another ugly face.
So you've worked in, you know, so many different media, and I wonder if you approach different, let's say, covers in different ways, because you've done comic book covers, you've done traditional book covers, magazines, albums. Do they each have sort of a distinct feeling to them or approach to them, or are they just basically maybe just different dimensions?
Different dimension. I think I apply the same principles, if you want to call it that, of painting or drawing. Good composition, good drawing, good color, good lighting. That's the main. Those are the strong composition. Placement of the objects within the picture plane. That's always there. I don't care what the hell it is. And that's predominant. You know, let's say if it's a rectangle, say a comic book cover, where the hell you position the head of the principal character. Pin that down, and then start to move stuff all around it, secondary stuff, thirdary stuff, to lead the thing around. That applies to everything. A horizontal composition, vertical composition, I don't care. It's any subject, for me, any and all subjects. The next step in that would be drawing. Now, make sure that the drawing is solid, that the drawing is good. So that applies to everything, whether it's a comic book character, or whether it's a realistic scene that you're doing of a you know, next door house, you know, positioning of it and the good drawing, make sure, I mean, craftsmanship of the drawing and everything. That's predominant for me. The next thing that applies to everything is lighting. What's the lighting on the scene? How are you lighting it? Is it a backlight? Is the backlight hot or cool? Is it a low light? Is it a top light? All that stuff. You work all that out and position your lights. And I think that understanding comes to us. We did photography for a living, for motion picture photography, for documentaries for a long time. And so, you know, you grasp lighting. Tim and I both did. We had a handle on that. And then color. In any subject, if it's a known subject like comic book characters, well, everybody knows there's the colors you're dealing with. If you're dealing with the traditional characters, you know, Wolverine's yellow and blue and black. I mean, now how do you light that? You can put colored lights on them, and maybe with those, most of the Marvel stuff, Tim and I, and then myself now even, zap up the chroma. In other words, what I mean by chroma is, you know, it's like turning up the volume in terms of intensity of color. So that means you're putting less white in the colors. and almost a lot of it's straight out of the tube as it comes home. So that straight red and straight blue and stuff like that. And other subjects, when I illustrated Frankenstein, Gene had her publishing company, Unicorn Publishing, and we would go through, Gene and I both would pick up favorite books of ours that were in the public domain, and one of them was Dracula. And so there I used black and Payne's gray, which I had abandoned years before, black as a crutch. So here I intentionally used it to tone the colors down to make it much more subtle. So it depends on mainly, I'd say composition and drawing are the same for everything, but it comes now the next phase is lighting and color would be a distinction for various topics, you know.
Talking about Dracula for a second, you didn't go with the normal Lugosi, which everyone seems to be a fallback on. And what is your impression? Because I know what the drawing is, but in your mind, who is Dracula? Because I really loved the direction you took, but how did you come up with that look for Dracula?
Well, first of all, the book, I mean, you read the text and you're going by that. So,
yeah,
you know, he has a mustache and he's younger when he does get the blood. He's older when hair color changes. And he's obviously good looking. In my, you know, when you read that, it's a Gothic romance. So then I did sketches, and then it was the model I chose, which is not a professional, a friend. And he fit the role, and I made it look like him. That's who he was. He was Dracula. So generally, you know, it'll end up with the model that I'm using, that the character will end up looking like, because we picked, Gene and I in this case, picked the models to fit the characters the way we saw them. So,
what about on Treasure Island?
Yeah, that for those covers I did for Marvel. I mean, it was very difficult for me to get beyond Robert Newton. Because I've been I saw that Tim and I saw that Disney Treasure Island with Robert Newton as Long John Silver when we were Bobby Driscoll's age. So Bobby Driscoll meaning to me. Silver was, oh my God. Tim and I went home and tried to make John Silver costumes over and over, tricorner hats, tie our leg back, you know, get the baggy pants, made a crutch and use a bathrobe. In that case, I struggled to stay away from him and grabbed a friend of mine who has that look that I wanted for, you know, Long John Silver. And one of the boy for Hawkins, he's the son of our then local police chief.
Wow.
So we were friends. So we were friends with the whole family. And he was exactly the right age. And in fact, we used John, the then police chief, as one of the pirates fighting on one of the covers. And another friend of mine fighting. So it's the character, the actor or the person you're picking ends up looking like the character. So
how much before you start a project, I think it's absolutely fascinating the way you guys sort of act out the scenes where you have people come in and all that. How much pre-work goes into a painting usually?
When you say free work, what do you mean?
No, pre-work, like, you know, research.
Oh, that's the proverbial, there's the painting and here's the rest of the work all down here, the iceberg, you know. Yeah, it's like, I'd say most of the time is taken up by that. Researching and developing and drawing and analyzing, thinking about it, you know, all that. And then painting is the quickest thing about the whole process. Because by the time both of us, now me alone, get to the painting, there's no guesswork. I know exactly what I want. I take my paint out, squeeze it up, mix up my palette. And it's a matter of getting that goopy stuff from here to there in the right order.
Right. Makes sense.
It's all Tim and I developed, because we had to take our palettes and switch them. He would take it home or I would keep it. We'd mix up from the highlight to the shadow, say on the skin color. You'd end up with literally 7 colors moving from the highlight to the shadow, and each was a very specific color. And these are mixed in very clean piles of paint on a piece of aluminum foil, put into a Tupperware container and kept airtight because it's acrylic, you know?
Right. So it doesn't dry out, yeah.
Yeah, so we developed that method so we could switch the colors back and forth. So on every painting I do, every color is mixed that way. Skin color is all mixed in a row of values moving from highlight to shadow. Hair color is all the same thing. You know, sky color, cloud color,
Wow.
cloth color, shirt, pants, all. So I end up with there's stacks of Tupperware containers
Yeah.
painted them. You see,
That's absolutely incredible. Like the time it takes and the vision to have to know exactly what you want to do for each little detail. I think
yeah, it's also so all it is. Like I say, I've worked it out. I've worked it out now, and Tim together. We've worked it out so much that it's all in those containers. All I got to do is get that up there in the right order.
incredible.
I'm not smearing. I see these movies or pictures of artists with these wood palette things, with the however, you know, that mustache thing. You see the palettes all goofed
Yeah,
up,
mixed up. Yeah.
Yeah.
all sloppy and how the hell can you see what's going on there? You know, I got to keep my colors very clearly succinct from each other, so that when you get done with a painting, they're still clear and succinct.
Mhm.
You know,
Makes sense.
because I'm simply blending up there. I'm blending. It's either wet blending or dry brush blending. I'm moving the brush around, so, you know. But it's like you keeping this very clear here, very clean.
Mhm.
So anyway, it's quick. It's a some. I tried to explain it to some artists in the past, and they don't get it. But it's a very faster way to work. Let's put it that way.
Because everything's right in front of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
It sounds like preparation is probably about 80 to 90% of the work, and
Yeah.
then it's almost you've done that much preparation and that much work that the painting is almost, I don't want to reduce it to this, but like paint by numbers. You know what where everything's going at that point, and it's just actually executing.
Yeah, I see what the end is going to be.
Right.
I'm hoping it will be. Yeah,
Mhm.
you know, you're never sure. Actually, you're never sure. That's what keeps you going through the painting, because you really aren't sure. You have a view of it, and you're heading towards that. You know, you're heading
Right.
towards. Yeah, but that was like Hitchcock was like that, right? But it came time to make the movie. He get it
It's
all
all in
figured
his
out.
head.
Right? It's all his head. It's
Yeah.
all
Right.
there. I need to do that.
Right.
That's kind of like what it isn't totally that way, because once you move into the painting, even though all this pre-planning is done and the palettes are all mixed and everything, there still is an excitement about it. There still is. You're excited through the thing up to probably 70% of the painting. Then you know, well, you got it knocked. You know exactly what's going to end up like, and now it's a real chore to get through that last 30%.
Right.
Yeah.
I wanted to turn back to comic books for a sec, and correct me if I'm wrong. Have you ever done much, or have you ever done any work or much work on interiors in terms of the sequential
We did one thing. I wanted to do for Marvel. We had done the masterpieces, and I wanted to do a graphic novel painted. I was friends with Gene and I were both friends with Joe Simon in the last 14 years of his life. So I wanted to do a Captain America painted graphic novel going back to World War II. And I'd done some sketches on it already. And Marvel said no. They weren't interested in it. And so they said, well, how about an X-Men 2099 book? I said, okay, fine. Okay. And so we did an X-Men 2099 book.
Yeah,
I mean, which didn't last very long. I enjoyed doing it. I mean, it was because Tim and I were drawing comics as little kids. I've always adulated sequential art. It's one of the highest art forms there is, as far as I'm concerned. One of the most sophisticated and complex, you know. I mean, and so I still do it. I mean, I've got projects, half a dozen of them, sequential projects. One I'm working on with my son, and he's a writer, and on Nikola Tesla. It's all sequential. It's, you know, I've got the whole 8 books all laid out, and a bunch of other stuff too. So I love the idiom. I mean, And for DC, it did one Superman graphic novel, written by Walt Simonson.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
You know, we're friends, we're good friends. And again, that was friend. The interesting thing about that whole period, I said to Gene, we were doing all these things. We did the children's book illustrations and together, and we were doing all kinds of other projects. And I said, Gene, I'd like to do something in comics. She said, what? And she had never, that wasn't a realm that she was into.
Mhm.
And I said, yeah. So she said, okay. And then she said, what? I said, well, DC. I mean, because that's what I grew up on. I Wonder Woman and Batman and Superman were that you know, those are
Yeah.
that's what I grew up on. That's what I wanted to do. So I went over there. They weren't very enthusiastic. They gave the first thing, that was me alone though. This is before Tim and I got back together.
Mhm.
And they gave me one cover to do for the Spectre, a new series by John Ostrander and Tom Mandrake, which I loved. I thought it was great. They should make a
Yeah,
movie.
that was fantastic.
They should make a film of that. And did one cover for them. And other than that, they were not enthusiastic. How can I put it politely? And which is disappointing. I mean, kind of to me. And so then I said, what the hell? Let's go to Marvel. So Gene being Gene, I'm ready to start sweeping floors at Marvel. I mean, I am. I mean, I knew I was like in that position of I've never done this professionally, even though I've got a long career and done a lot of stuff, but I've never done this. I'll start wherever I got to start. I don't care. I want to do something in that realm.
Mhm.
And I had no idea specifically what it was even yet. So we're gonna call one of the editors or something, try to get up. She said, no. Who she called? Stan. She said, why start here? Well, why not we go? So Stan was very, very helpful in giving Gene the right person to call. And we went over there. Joe Calamari was the boss then. Anybody know that name?
Yeah.
It sounds
I do.
familiar.
He had a can of squid on his desk.
Yeah.
He was a great guy. So we went in, and Gene and I, not Tim, Tim isn't in on this yet. And we're walking around and they're showing us the whole place. Tom DeFalco was the editor-in-chief.
Mhm.
We're shaking. And I'm looking at all the stuff and I'm in awe. I'm a big fanboy. Ooh. And Tom stops quietly in the middle of this. All these people are around. He says, can I ask you a question? What the hell are you doing here? And I said, I don't get it. What do you mean? He said, why are you here? What do you want to do? It was like I didn't know that conversation that had existed well, I knew that comics art was way down here. There was a shit that was an art. That was trash, junk, disposable garbage. Illustration was a step higher. So I was an illustrator.
Oh.
In that kind of like, you know what I mean? What are you doing here? And I said, what this is the most complex art form that there is, for Christ's sake. What do you mean? And he said, and then he said, what do you want to do? I said, I don't know, whatever. So he called Gene the next day for the Marvel Masterpieces set.
Mhm.
So that's how I got into that. And and then I've done, I don't know how many paintings for Marvel since then, hundreds.
You did 60 posters.
Gene's talking. I did what?
6 posters.
Oh yeah, 6 posters. I mean, tons of stuff. I mean, all kinds of things. And I haven't done it lately since this whole thing's, you know what I mean, happened.
Mhm.
But heavy metal's been going through some changes, but we're kind of reconnecting with them, the new regime that's taking place, because that was one of the first things that when Gene and I started working together in '79, there were 2 projects, big ones, that she licensed. The first one I've done a dream painting of a nightmare of what I was going through back in the '60s, and the whole political, sociological, religious, racial changes that were going on that I personally was all involved in. And it showed up in this painting of these hulking guys with whips and blood and a flagellated skin hanging on a rack. And the depths of the dregs of the end of the world sort of like thing. And I had a paint, and I painted it, and it was in the Marvel, Valentine did an art book on Tim and me, and that painting was in the art book.
Mhm.
And Jean calls me in my studio back in 1980. She says, Greg, Black Sabbath wants to use that painting for a cover for their latest album, Mob Rules. I said, hell no, this is too personal to me. She hung up and said yes to them. And I'm eternally, she told me, and I started freaking out, but I said, oh, it'll be a whole new thing. Yeah, well, it was a whole new thing. It was great. And what the hell point? What was the question you asked me? See, I start rambling like this and I forget the point that I'm trying to make.
Well, I'm curious about the album cover because, like you just said, it was a very personal painting. How long did it take for
Oh
you?
yeah, okay. I was talking about heavy metal. Okay.
Yeah.
And then we did a poster. I don't know if you Verkerke. There was a Dutch publishing company back,
Right.
biggest in the world at that time, and
Right.
we were doing a bunch of posters with them.
Right.
And one of them was the first one, and it did extremely well. Was this nude girl? Not that you see anything. Her hair's covering her breasts, and you can't see, her legs up, and she's laying in a bunch of calla lilies, and there's a unicorn, a white unicorn, standing over her with this dramatic sky, and it's like all very cute and sweet, and kind of suggestive.
Mhm.
And heavy metal, Gene licensed up to heavy metal for the cover 1982 cover.
Mhm.
And that hit, that one hit out of the ballpark. That was the biggest selling issue in the first 25 years of their existence. And they were analyzing why. It's because of the suggestiveness and innocence of the picture. That mothers letting their 14-year-old sons hang the poster up on the wall, and you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so then I did a bunch of those kinds of things. Girls with a Fantasy Creature through the 80s. Then into this was very Kevin Eastman didn't own it yet. I forgot who the hell owned it. Then Kevin Eastman owned it, and we did covers for him. And then it stopped. There was different changeovers. I have no idea. I lost all connection. So we've got a renewed connection with the new CEO, and it looks like that may be, we'll see where it's going to go. I don't know if it's going to, I'm hoping that ends up as something. Sounds like fun.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
What I have another question I was going to ask, but just based on what you were just saying, what artwork or what project are you most widely recognized for when fans come up to you when they want you to sign something? What's besides Star Wars? Because I know that's a whole other thing, but
The Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings
And Marvel masterpieces.
Okay.
1994, I think, 5, 7. Yeah. That's what mainly it is. Yep.
Makes sense. And another one, a friend of mine, was huge into Shadow of the Empire when you guys did the cards for that.
Oh yeah.
What was their pitch to you, and how did that all work out?
Oh, that was great. Gene again did the contract for that, which was phenomenal. And I should have had Gene when I did the first poster, but that was BJ, before Gene.
Before Gene.
Yeah, and because I'd still own it, I'd still have it.
Yeah.
And, Lucas never had it. Alan Ladd Jr. had the poster.
Oh, okay.
Question.
What's it? Gene's yelling at me. Answer the question. What question?
Question about shadows again.
Shadows. See, I have a tendency to drift. Gene, get back on track again. Shadows of the Empire. Tops trading cards. Yes. They called again. What's his name over there, Gene? Ira Friedman. Ira Friedman wanted us to do a card set for Tops, and Gene said yes. So then I said yes, and Tim said yes, and did we go to Lucas first, Gene, in California, or what?
No. They sent us shadows. They sent us the manuscript.
They sent us a manuscript. We read the whole thing, picked out a bunch of scenes, illustrated in a normal method, all the key characters and everything, different environments.
Did 100 paintings.
Did 100 paintings. And that was not done that fast. I don't think, I forgot how fast. It was pretty quick though,
5 months.
5 months. And fortunately, because I think Tim and I were, where the hell are we gonna get all the costumes and everything? So some guy through Tops,
Mhm.
a super fan. Nothing, this had nothing to do with Lucas.
Right.
He was just this freaked out, maniacal super fan. He had freaking 10 stormtrooper costumes. This guy comes with two of his friends. Holy crap. There's piles of props and guns and costumes. It was incredible. It's fantastic. And so he posed for a bunch of the characters, and his girlfriend with him posed for Leia. And they got a model that I've been using for the principal character that I've been using for some of my superhero stuff for the Marvel set. What the hell was his name? The main Dash Rendar.
Okay.
Right. He posed for him, and I would do. Tim and I were doing stuff in that set. Like I wanted a couple of panels. One of the panels, I don't know if you're aware of it. There was a 3-fingered hand coming in from one side. It was like a green clawed hand with white hair on it. And then from another side is the 3-fingered suction cup hand.
Mhm.
Well, those are from our two favorite George Pal films, The Time Machine and The War of the Worlds.
War of the Worlds, yeah.
The Morlock hand and the Martian.
Mhm. That's awesome.
I like doing that kind of thing.
Really cool.
But, hey, it was fun. We did that all that way, and then there was when that next batch of films came out.
Mhm.
Random House wanted us to do what the hell was it, a pop-up book or something, Gene?
Flap.
A flat book.
Okay.
For that movie, for those movies.
Mhm.
And I thought it was kind of interesting because they want us to come out there, so we went out to the ranch, and everybody there that was what were they, licensees, Gene? What do you call them? All the people that were licensees of Pepsi-Cola, blah, blah, blah. Pepsi-Cola just spent $3 billion for, and they're all sitting in this theater. Hundreds of people sitting in this theater, illustrators and everybody
Right.
in the universe, and they show you a pitch, rough cut of the stuff.
Mhm.
Some guy came out, I don't know who the hell he was, worked there, obviously, and he says, and everybody's sitting and listen. And he's talking. I forgot what the hell it was, but one thing that stuck out in my mind was I thought was kind of interesting. He said, "We don't want you to be in this just for the money." There's Pepsi. They just paid $3 billion.
Right.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, well, I'm look. I'm never in anything only for the money. I'm in it because I want to enjoy the damn thing.
Right.
That's
Right.
the issue for me. But I
Mhm.
thought that was kind of what's the word? I don't know what word to use.
That's a,
Audacious.
yeah.
Sort of like said like this too.
From the heart. Yeah.
Thought it was kind of funny.
Greg,
But-
as we're sort of coming to a close of the hour, I wanted to ask a question about what hasn't been, what might still be, I suppose, which is, are there particular properties, books, series, comics, movies that you haven't had the opportunity to work on that you would jump at the chance for?
Not anymore. I'm too old for that shit. I'm 84. So for me now, what I want to do is do my own projects.
Okay.
You get me?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
That's I've always wanted to do that. I keep working on stuff. And so for me, that's kind of like where it's at. As
Mhm.
much as I love much that's out there,
Yep.
I think though I'm looking for the possibilities, like possibly, like I said, with this heavy metal deal, where it will be original material. So that for me is what most interests me right now. Either that or a sentimental journey back to the ancient past. I started to do Jean's idea. She said, "Why don't you do some posters of the movies that you love as a kid? If you were an illustrator back then, hired to do the poster." So
That'd be great.
I've done a couple of them. I did Creature of the Black Lagoon and King Kong, and I've got a bunch of them lined up that I want to do. I got a whole stack of them. War of the Worlds I want to do, and George Pals and tons of them. They're all over the place. how I would like a poster to be done. Nightmare Alley,
Mhm.
which,
Yeah.
which that's a whole special thing for me. I saw that movie when I was 8 years old, my dad.
Mhm.
And you know, back then, even though it was you know, the 40s, and you couldn't, you had to stick to the code, ran everything, right?
Mhm.
But still, that film appeared with the button that this is suggested for a mature audience. Well,
Mhm.
Tyrone Power, right? I don't know if you know that history, right?
Mhm.
Do you know the movie at all?
My dad would watch it. I think I saw it a few times.
The old one, and I'm not talking about
Yeah.
Del
Yeah.
Toro.
I know it through the new one, having
No, no,
discovered the no, not the new one. I'm just saying
I
I
love
discovered
Del
that there
Toro.
was an old one. based
Yeah.
on the new one.
Del Toro is a genius to me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan. The thing is, that Tyrone Power one really hit me because you're 8-year-old, you know. I had no idea what the hell was going on,
Right.
because you're dealing with all these subjects, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Charlatanism and religion and you know, quack psychiatry and all this kind of stuff, all these major issues.
Mhm.
Especially if you read the book. The thing is, nobody's attained the book, and I'm not one of these guys that says, you know, oh, the book is everything and the movie's nothing. I just the book is astounding, really.
Yeah.
And as far as noir and as far as what it's trying to say back then, you know what I mean, when you
Mhm.
wrote it. And but anyway, that's a long story. I'm doing, when they did the poster for that movie, because I forgot who the hell the studio was.
Mhm.
I want Tyrone Power in it because he was the, you know, the handsome lead, and this is a degenerate guy we're showing here on the screen.
Mhm.
And so when they did the poster, if you remember, it's just a big headshot of him, sort of with a
Mhm.
cigarette hanging out of his mouth, with 3 women behind him. And I figure, hell no, I'll get in. And so I got, you know, him as the alcoholic, dark silhouetted, the big board ready to whack in the bottle in one hand, and the geek in the background, because the whole geek thing is missing,
Mhm.
you know, and very much a collage type thing, done in 3 colors, black, red, and white. So that's, I'm gonna paint that one next, you know.
Yes, please do that plot project with your
Yes, continue
interpretation.
that
I
project.
would be absolutely fascinated to see your take on these posters. I think they would be brilliant.
All the Universal stuff. I mean, I've done layouts
Mhm.
on them all. I've got like maybe 50 of them laid out already.
Wow.
So anyway, that's a whole big thing.
Yes.
Yeah. So there, that's the it. Kind of like make myself wrong for the last answer I gave you, that it was only going to be original material.
Any other projects coming up the fans could look forward to? I know you mentioned possibility of heavy metal.
I always got to ask Gene stuff. Gene, is there anything coming up?
Yeah, I'm working on stuff.
Gene's working on many things. Well, the Trans-Siberian Orchestra is a whole area too, that I don't know if you know those guys.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do.
I'm
I've
gonna
done all
ask
the
about
work.
that.
I've done
Mhm.
all their work for what, 20 years now?
Yeah.
20 years. It's like, it hits me like 20 years.
Yeah.
So I'll be, hopefully we'll be starting next year's, Gene designs the program.
Mhm.
It's the most phenomenal program in rock and roll history.
Right.
It's a collector's item in itself. It's beautiful. And she designs it all, produces it all. I do all the artwork, a big wraparound 4-page panel cover, and interior. And so I'll be starting on that. And that's a big fan following for that. You
Oh
know?
yeah.
Huge fan following. Yeah.
So, I mean,
What about your pen?
oh, pinups. What the hell am I talking about here? I've been starting pinups, retro pinups, which is probably politically incorrect to talk about these days. Is it? Or isn't it?
We can go for it. Why not?
Pinups. Yeah.
I
I
mean,
mean, there's nothing inherently bad about pinups.
Bad, right? Isn't it?
It's all it's all upside.
I don't get the, I get, you know, the whole thing. But also, I think people don't understand also that, you know, some of the models back then, you know, Jay Mansfield, Betty Page, and all the Tempest Storm and everything. This was their way to say to you, telling me that I gotta be in the bedroom and in the kitchen with my little apron on for you men when you come home. So you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
That's what that was all about. A
Right.
large part of it for the women.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know, in any event, I have a highest respect and love of women, so that
Mhm.
I hope that's what shows through
Through
in
the
my
pictures.
pictures.
Mhm.
It's not like I'm, people say exploitation, even though I've got no accusations really. But I mean, I read about what happens to other people.
Mhm.
You know, exploitation. What the hell are the words are?
Right.
What's the other word that they use? I forget. Anyway, it's, I don't know what they even mean by that.
Right.
When
Yeah.
they use that word, you know?
Makes sense.
I don't know what
I think you're okay doing the pinups.
Yeah.
I have all
And we are back. What a wonderful guy. I really love the stories about he and his brother almost working like as a tag team. One would work during the day, the other one would tag in at night just to get projects done quickly. And it's so incredible that these two men had such a vision that they shared with their art, because it's art that stands the test of time. And not too many artists can say that their paintings or their creations have lasted as long as theirs have.
Yeah, this was an interesting interview. I was not familiar with all of the Hildebrandt's work before talking to Greg. And I just, I fell in love with it. It's really, this lush fantasy realm of whether we're talking about Magic the Gathering, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, what have you, Dungeons and Dragons, all kinds of stuff. And it's just amazing the work that they can produce and the worlds that they can evoke through, a paintbrush or ink and what have you. So great talking to Greg. We wanted to let you know that we have just launched a subscription service, and it is part of the Buzzsprout system. So if you go to our website, which is $binbandits.buzzsprout.com, you'll see a little support button, and you can support our show. As I say in the description, we're not looking to get rich off this, but it would be great if we can get some support for just, producing the show, trying to find the best comics creators. And in exchange, we will definitely give you a shout out on the show. We will give you a preview of some of our upcoming interviews so you can submit questions. And there may be some other bonuses coming later. So again, please go to $binbandits.buzzsprout.com. Check it out. Support us if you can. Otherwise, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.